Welcome to Shinobi Chronicles. Let's dive in a Naruto fanfic. If you like this kind of content, then please subscribe to my channel and like this video. Today we will see the next part of our fanfic. Chapter 5, Unspoken Bonds. The sun was beginning to set, casting warm hues of orange and red over the rooftops of Konoha. Inside Raizen's home, the soft sounds of Naruto's laughter echoed as he crawled across the wooden floor, attempting to grab a small wooden kunai toy. Raizen, seated at a low table filled with documents, glanced at the boy with a smirk. "You're getting faster, huh?" Naruto babbled in response, his bright blue eyes filled with mischief. It was moments like these that made Raizen forget about the burdens of his work, the expectations placed on him as one of Konoha's most influential figures. The business empire he had built over the years had brought him power, but none of that compared to the simple joy of seeing Naruto grow. Then, a knock at the door. Raizen turned his head. He already knew who it was. When he opened the door, Kurenai Yuhi stood there, her expression relaxed, though her movements were slightly stiff. "You're late," Raizen teased, stepping aside to let her in. She gave him a tired smirk as she entered. Mission ran longer than expected. That's when he noticed her bandaged hands and the faint red stains on her shoulder and back. His expression darkened. "You're injured." "It's nothing serious," she reassured, stretching her arms. "Just some cuts. You don't have to look so worried." Raizen narrowed his eyes but didn't push further. Instead, he gestured toward Naruto, who had stopped playing and was now crawling toward Kurenai excitedly. Kurenai's face softened immediately. She knelt down, scooping Naruto up into her arms. "Hey there, troublemaker. Were you being good today?" Naruto giggled, tugging at a strand of her long black hair. Raizen watched the scene, leaning against the table with his arms crossed. "He's been fine. A bit too energetic, though. I don't know where he gets it from." Kurenai chuckled, swaying Naruto gently in her arms. "It's called being a child, Raizen. You should try playing with him more instead of burying yourself in paperwork all the time." Raizen sighed. Running a business empire isn't exactly a side job. "But raising a child isn't something you can do alone either," Kurenai said, looking at him meaningfully. There was an unspoken truth between them. She had been there for him since the beginning. Whenever he struggled, Kurenai had been the one to step in, guiding him, scolding him when needed, and offering support in ways he never asked for but always appreciated. She had become a part of his daily life. A quiet evening. Dinner was a simple meal: rice, grilled fish, and miso soup. Kurenai, despite her injuries, had insisted on helping in the kitchen. At one point, as they both reached for a bowl at the same time, their hands brushed against each other. Raizen felt her fingers twitch before she quickly pulled away. A slight pink tint appeared on her cheeks, but she kept her gaze focused on the food. Raizen smirked slightly. "You're oddly shy for someone so confident on the battlefield." "Shut up and eat," Kurenai muttered, taking a seat. Raizen chuckled but didn't push further. As they ate, Naruto sat between them, happily munching on small pieces of fish that Kurenai fed him. It had become a routine of sorts, Kurenai coming over after missions, helping with Naruto, and spending the evening at his home. It felt natural. Wounds and worries. Later that night, after Naruto had fallen asleep, Raizen finally confronted her about her injuries. "Let me see your back." Kurenai raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." Raizen sighed, setting down the medical kit he had fetched. "I know you're downplaying it, but those cuts aren't small. I can see the blood through your uniform." Kurenai hesitated but eventually turned around, pulling down the upper part of her flak jacket to reveal her shoulder. Raizen's jaw tightened at the sight of the thin but deep cuts running along her back. "Tch, you call this nothing serious?" Kurenai shrugged. "I've had worse." Raizen didn't respond. Instead, he carefully applied antiseptic, his fingers brushing against her bare skin as he worked. He felt Kurenai tense slightly at the contact. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft crackling of a nearby lantern. "You're always worrying," Kurenai said softly. "Of course, I am," Raizen replied, his voice quieter than usual. "You come back injured, and I'm just supposed to act like it's normal." Kurenai turned her head slightly, looking at him from the corner of her eye. "It is normal for a shinobi." Raizen paused. "I know." The unspoken words hung in the air. "But that doesn't mean I have to like it." After a moment, Kurenai exhaled. Thank you. Raizen finished bandaging her back and leaned back slightly. Just don't make a habit of it. She chuckled. No promises. As she adjusted her uniform, Raizen caught her gaze. For a brief second, there was something there, something deeper than friendship, something neither of them had put into words. Chapter 6, Under the Night's Glow. The quiet hum of the ceiling lights filled the room, casting a soft glow over the wooden floor. Outside, Konoha was wrapped in the stillness of the night, the usual liveliness of the village replaced by an eerie silence. Raizen sat on the couch, his hands resting on his knees, fingers slightly curled. He exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the medkit beside him. The faint scent of antiseptic lingered in the air. Across from him, Kurenai sat with practiced patience, her crimson eyes studying his expression as he cleaned the last of her wounds. Her flak jacket had been set aside, revealing a tight mesh undershirt beneath. Though none of the injuries were life-threatening, the deep cuts on her shoulder and back told him enough. This mission had been dangerous. "You're unusually silent tonight," Kurenai murmured, breaking the silence. Raizen didn't respond immediately. He was focused, threading the thin medical needle carefully. He had done this countless times over the years, stitching wounds, disinfecting cuts, but this was different. This was her. His hands were steady, but there was a tension in his chest that he couldn't shake. Kurenai winced slightly as he pressed a clean cloth against the wound on her back. "You sure you're not secretly a medic?" she joked, glancing at him from the corner of her eye. Raizen huffed. "If I were, you wouldn't be getting hurt like this." She chuckled softly but said nothing more. The room returned to silence as he carefully began stitching the cut on her shoulder. The rhythmic pull of the thread through her skin, the soft flickering of the overhead light, everything felt strangely intimate. His fingers brushed against her skin as he tied off the stitch, and he felt Kurenai tense ever so slightly. He wasn't sure if it was from the pain or from something else. He had been holding back for too long. The moment stretched on, something unspoken passing between them. Before he could think, before he could stop himself, he moved. In an instant, he was standing in front of her. Kurenai blinked, caught off guard by his sudden closeness. Her tired crimson eyes locked onto his, a silent question lingering in them. Raizen hesitated for only a second. Then, he reached out. His fingers gently cupped her cheek, his thumb grazing her skin. Raizen. He kissed her. It wasn't planned. It wasn't carefully thought out. It was instinct, raw, undeniable. His lips pressed against hers, firm yet hesitant, as if he wasn't sure if he should go further. For a fleeting moment, she didn't move. Then, just as quickly, she pulled away, her breath unsteady. The room was painfully silent. Kurenai's hand lifted to her lips, her crimson eyes wide with surprise. What was that? Raizen's heart pounded in his chest, but his voice remained steady. "I didn't want to wait anymore," he admitted, his tone low, rough. Her gaze searched his, a whirlwind of emotions flickering behind those deep red eyes. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she sighed. Running a hand through her hair, she muttered, "You're impossible." Raizen exhaled, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "You knew that already." Kurenai shook her head, but there was no anger in her expression, just something else. Something she wasn't ready to name. Next time, she murmured, "at least give me a warning, idiot." Raizen chuckled softly. Noted. The tension in the air softened, but a shift had settled between them. Something had changed. And this time, there was no going back. Chapter 7, A New Beginning. The morning sun cast a golden glow over Konoha as Raizen made his way through the village. Today was important, not just for him, but for his future. He was going to propose to Kurenai, and before that, he had one more thing to do. He was going to meet Itachi. A visit to an old friend. Itachi Uchiha was already waiting when Raizen arrived at their usual meeting spot, a quiet tea house on the outskirts of the village. Itachi's sharp eyes studied him as he took a sip of his tea. "You're early," Raizen said, taking a seat across from him. Itachi set down his cup. "And you're nervous." Raizen sighed. "That obvious. You don't call me out of nowhere unless it's important." Raizen smirked. Yeah, you know me too well." Itachi leaned forward slightly. "So, what is it?" Raizen exhaled and placed a small velvet box on the table. Itachi's gaze flickered toward it before returning to Raizen's face. I see. Raizen chuckled. Of course you do. You're Itachi. A faint smile tugged at Itachi's lips. You're proposing to Kurenai. Tonight, Raizen confirmed. I figured, before I do something so life-changing, I'd talk to a good friend first. Itachi nodded, his expression unreadable. You've built a strong life for yourself here, Raizen. More than most ever could. Kurenai is a good person. If she makes you happy, then you should hold on to that. Raizen ran a hand through his hair. That's the plan. Itachi studied him for a moment. I'm happy for you. Raizen raised an eyebrow. Huh. Didn't expect you to say that so openly. Itachi smirked. Consider it a rare moment. Raizen laughed, standing up. Well, wish me luck. You won't need it, Itachi said simply. She'll say yes. Raizen chuckled. I sure hope so. With that, he turned and walked away, feeling a little lighter. The proposal. That night, under the soft glow of Konoha's streetlights, Raizen walked toward Kurenai's home, carrying Naruto on his shoulders. Big bro, are we really going to Kurenai-ne's house? Naruto asked excitedly. Yeah, Raizen replied. But remember, behave yourself. Naruto grinned. I always do. Raizen gave him a doubtful look but chuckled. Tonight, everything would change. Kurenai opened the door, surprised. Raizen, Naruto. What are you two doing here? Naruto hopped down from Raizen's shoulders and grinned. Big bro said we had something important to do. Raizen cleared his throat. Can we come in? She nodded. The house smelled faintly of jasmine. Naruto immediately made himself comfortable, while Raizen stood near the center of the room, turning to face Kurenai. Kurenai, I have something important to say. She tilted her head. What is it? Raizen exhaled, reached into his pocket, and dropped to one knee. Naruto gasped audibly. Kurenai's eyes widened. Raizen. Raizen's voice was steady, but his heart pounded. Kurenai, you've been by my side for so long. You helped me when I was lost, supported me, and you became part of my life in a way I never expected. And somewhere along the way, I realized. He opened the small box, revealing a beautifully crafted silver ring with a deep crimson gem. I never want to live a life without you. Silence filled the air. Naruto's mouth hung open. Big bro. Kurenai stared at the ring, her hands trembling slightly. Raizen took a deep breath. Kurenai Yuhi, will you marry me? For a moment, no one spoke. Then, wham! Kurenai punched Raizen's shoulder, hard. Idiot, she muttered, her voice shaking. Raizen blinked. Huh. She wiped at her eyes quickly before whispering, of course, you fool. Naruto practically jumped in excitement. Whoa, so does that mean Kurenai-ne is going to be my big sister? Kurenai laughed, ruffling his hair. Looks like it. Raizen slipped the ring onto her finger, feeling warmth spread through his chest. Naruto crossed his arms. TCH. Big bro, you should have told me. I would have helped you. Raizen smirked. I think I did just fine. Naruto grinned widely. Yeah, but now we gotta celebrate, right? Kurenai glanced at Raizen, shaking her head with amusement. Guess we do. Raizen exhaled, pulling both of them into a warm embrace. For the first time in a long while, he felt complete. Chapter 8. A Grand Celebration. The news of Raizen and Kurenai's engagement spread like wildfire across Konoha. As a man who had risen from nothing to control almost all of Konoha's businesses, Raizen was an influential figure, and his wedding was bound to be a grand event. But more than that, this ceremony was also Naruto's first real experience of family and friendship, a chance for him to meet the people who would become an important part of his life. And Raizen wasn't going to let this moment pass unnoticed. The invitations. Raizen made sure to invite all of Naruto's future friends, the ones he knew would be there for him. He personally reached out to the parents of Shikamaru, Choji, Kiba, and even Sasuke, ensuring their families received formal invitations. However, he didn't stop there. He made an exclusive invitation to the Hyuga clan, and unlike most formal events, he made sure to invite the branch members as well. This act alone caused quite a stir within the Hyuga household, as branch members were rarely treated as equals. Many whispered about what kind of man Raizen truly was. Additionally, the Uchiha clan was invited, though most of them dismissed the invitation outright. Only Itachi accepted. This was expected, but Raizen didn't care. He wasn't inviting people out of obligation, he was inviting those he believed should be there. Naruto and Hinata's first meeting. Before the grand banquet, Naruto had a special meeting arranged just for him. Inside one of the private gardens near Raizen's estate, a small girl with pale lavender eyes and short dark hair stood shyly, clutching her hands together. Hinata Hyuga. She had been brought along as part of the exclusive invitation to the Hyuga clan, though her father had only allowed her to attend due to Raizen's insistence. Naruto, ever the ball of energy, ran up to her with a wide grin. "Oi, are you the person Big Bro said I'd meet?" Hinata's face turned red almost instantly. Why yes," she stammered. Naruto tilted his head. "Huh, why are you acting all weird?" Raizen, standing off to the side, chuckled to himself. So, this was how their friendship began. Though hesitant at first, Hinata slowly started talking to Naruto. It began awkwardly, but Naruto's natural energy and lack of formality made her more comfortable. By the time their meeting was over, the two had already started laughing together. "You're pretty cool, Hinata," Naruto declared. Hinata blushed furiously, unable to form a proper response. Raizen smiled to himself. Good. Now things were in motion. The banquet. The day of the grand banquet finally arrived. The venue was spectacular, an open courtyard decorated with intricate banners, glowing lights, and lavishly arranged tables filled with all kinds of delicacies. People from all over Konoha had gathered, including many influential figures. At the center of it all was Raizen Kurogane. She looked stunning in a deep red kimono embroidered with golden patterns, and he wore a traditional black robe with subtle silver details. Together, they stood before the assembled guests, officially marking their union. Naruto was running around, introducing himself to everyone, clearly having the time of his life. He had already hit it off with Shikamaru, Choji, Kiba, and even Sasuke, though the latter acted as cool as ever. Hinata, meanwhile, was nervously glancing at Naruto from afar, causing Raizen to smirk. A moment just for them. As the evening wore on and the guests enjoyed the celebrations, Raizen led Kurogane to a secluded balcony overlooking the village. The stars stretched across the night sky, the lights of Konoha shimmering below them. Kurogane exhaled softly, leaning on the railing. "You really went all out, huh?" Raizen stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "Of course. I told you, I don't do things halfway." She turned to look at him, her deep crimson eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lanterns. "You've changed my life, Raizen." Raizen chuckled. "I should be saying that to you." Kurogane rolled her eyes but smiled. Then, after a moment of silence, she whispered, "Are you happy?" Raizen turned to her fully, his gaze softening. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached up, gently cupping her cheek. "I am," he said simply. Then, without another word, he leaned in and kissed her. It was slow and tender, a kiss that spoke of everything he couldn't put into words, their struggles, their journey, and the future they were about to embrace. Kurogane melted into it, her fingers tightening slightly against his robe. When they finally pulled apart, she smirked. "Took you long enough." Raizen chuckled. "Hey, I had to make sure the timing was perfect." From behind them, Naruto's voice suddenly interrupted. "Oi, big bro, I saw that." Raizen and Kurogane froze. Turning their heads, they saw Naruto standing in the doorway, looking absolutely scandalized. Kurogane gasped in embarrassment, while Raizen sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Naruto, you really have the worst timing." Naruto folded his arms. "TCH. And you didn't even tell me first. I should have been prepared for this." Raizen smirked. "What, did you want a warning before I kissed my fiancé?" Naruto pouted. "Yes." Kurogane laughed, shaking her head. All right, you little troublemaker. Come here." Naruto rushed forward, and she pulled him into a hug. Raizen watched them, warmth filling his chest. This was his family, and he wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.